countries, Mali, Chad, Guinea, Sudan, Burkina Faso, Gabon, Niger. The West looks at this like maybe there's a problem going on here. How do you look at it?
There is a serious problem for the West, for sure. I think the West did not see it coming. However, it was very naive of the Western nations to think that the exploitation of Africa was going to continue unabated forever. The West is definitely, if I may use a four-letter word, not so kind, they may be pissing in their pants, because what's happening in Africa is indeed a revolution, and a revolution that's way past due.
So you see it as a revolution, but what kind of revolution is it, in the sense that do you think this is throwing off repression from France, from the United States, from other nations? What kind of revolution do you see as underway?
Well, I like to think, if I were to use the biblical terms, this is a revelation among Black people. They're waking up and realizing that what has been happening is wrong, is wrong, is wrong, and change must come. And for true change to come, it must be brought by the people. What you are seeing is an African electorate that is now awoken, that is informed. They understand the real issues. In the past, Africans have been misinformed, misled, and given false information, and being thrown a shiny object and being told only the African heads of states are the problem. But now they understand the invisible hand and the role that the invisible hand is playing to make sure that Africa remains where they want Africa to be. The African heads of states, particularly those heads of states of the former French colonies, majority of them were just puppets put in place to continue the same French legacy, which basically boxed them in, where it said you have no control of your military, you have no control of your natural resources, you have no control of your finances, and if you continue from those three areas, you are free to rule your country any which way you want. What power does that president have? And in the past, any president that has tried to buck the system and do something about taking control of the financial resources, and I'm talking about African countries depositing their bank reserves with France. I'm talking about African countries giving up their natural resources, no value addition, France having first right of refusal for all the natural resources discovered yet to be discovered, France companies having first right of refusal for all contracts, large, small, private, public, France having military presence in those countries, and France having the ability to invade them in the event that they feel their interests are being violated. France making sure that those countries can only be trained by France, the military can only be trained by France. The military equipment can only be bought from France. Come on now. Our people didn't understand all this. So we can change African heads of states in those former French colonies like we change clothes. If those fundamentals are not addressed, nothing is going to change. The Africans now understand where the real problem is. The real problem, like I've always said, the biggest risk to peace and security in Africa is France. Let's make no mistake about that. We have other former colonizers. Yes, they still have a stronghold in Africa through their multinational companies that continue to siphon billions out of Africa every year. We are aware of that. But the biggest problem when it comes to former French colonies is France. Its roots are so entrenched in those countries, and now France is trying to expand into other nations. Until we address those agreements African countries were forced to sign, nothing, and I mean nothing we do, is going to bring us the true economic liberation, which is what Africa needs, which is what Africa was denied when African countries were being given their independence. We are now dealing with an African electorate that understand what is really going on in Africa.
Well, let me ask you, Ambassador, let's take Niger for a moment. President Mohamed Bazoum is a popular president in the West. You know, the IMF liked him, the World Bank liked him, the United States liked him, France seemed to like him. I would like our listeners to understand the gap in the popularity of someone like President Bazoum and performance, And what is going on that makes that revolution, that coup as we see it in Niger, a different story than we're seeing?
The performance that you're talking about is the performance of what Nigerian minerals are doing to French education, to French healthcare, to French infrastructure. You tell me, why is it that 95% of Nigerian uranium is powering over 30% of France, while over 70% of Nigerians have no electricity? How is that okay? How is even President Bazoum proud of himself with that fact? There is no development in Niamey. I was in Niamey a few years ago when we had the AU summit. It was pitiful to see the level of underdevelopment that Niger has. There is no development in Niger. Let's make no mistake about it. Niger is the second poorest country in Africa, in the world, in fact. So how can President Bazoum be proud of himself? What development is he talking about? You're talking about developing France? There is no development in Niger, one of the poorest countries on earth. And of course, IMF would love them. World Bank would love them. France would love him because he is allowing the pilferage, the exploitation to continue. And that's why the people are rising up to say, if you can't stand up to the bullies and tell them that the exploitation can no longer continue, and look President Macron in the face and say, President Macron, how is it okay that my money, my bank reserves, my natural resources are funding French education, are funding French healthcare, are funding French infrastructure? How is that okay, President Macron? Answer us. Africans in Niger, they want to know. So when you tell me that he is favored by the West, it makes sense. But he's definitely not favored by the people because there is no development. Let's be serious here. Let's stop pushing lies about what's happening. They know the exploitation is happening. It's happening in Niger. It's happening in Burkina Faso. It's happening in Mali. It's happening in every African country. Let's make no mistake about this. We're sick and tired of giving up our lunch to Western nations. African children, they need to eat too. African children need to go to school. African children need good healthcare systems. Behind all that abuse, we need to let the Western world know that there are millions of African children who are going hungry, millions of African children who are dying, millions of women, African women who are dying, giving birth to another life, millions of African youth who are unemployed, all because the Western world is continuing with the agenda of exploitation, exploitation, and exploitation of the African continent. That era is over. Well, and we're coming together as Africans and saying, enough is enough. This has got to stop.